Imagine this scenario. A swarm of Ukrainian strike drones may have been used against Russian logistics traffic on the R280 route, one of Moscow's most important supply routes linking Rostov, Mariupol, Melitopol, and Crimea. This was not just another roadside ambush. The route is used to move fuel, ammunition, and other military cargo. In a possible scenario, the column could include fuel trucks, ammunition vehicles, support vehicles, and escorts. In other words, it would be carrying the basic things Russia needs to keep its southern front moving. If this convoy reached Melitopol, fuel could keep flowing toward Russian units. Artillery shells could be moved closer to the front. Reinforcement troops could arrive in time for the next phase of operations. But before that could happen, Ukrainian reconnaissance UAVs may have been watching from above, while other strike drones were prepared for a possible attack. The target would not only be the vehicles on the road. The real target would be the rhythm of Russia's war machine in the south. Ukraine appears to be changing the battlefield. Instead of only hitting trenches or tanks near the front line, Kyiv is trying to turn rear supply routes into dangerous combat zones. A truck carrying fuel may now become a target long before it reaches the battlefield. Stay with us, because this convoy scenario may reveal a much bigger problem for Russia's southern war effort. Was this only one successful drone ambush, or is Ukraine slowly turning the road to Crimea into a trap from the sky? The R280 highway mattered because it was one of the roads Russia needed to keep its southern front supplied and connected to Crimea. If the convoy was moving along this corridor, it would have been traveling on a route linking Rostov, Mariupol, Melitopol, and the Crimean Peninsula. On the map, it looked like a long road near the Sea of Azov. On the battlefield, it could function as a supply line carrying fuel, ammunition, troops, and protected vehicles toward Russia's southern war zone. That would make the convoy important before Ukraine even launched the strike. Fuel trucks could support tanks, armored vehicles, generators, and field units. Ammunition trucks could supply artillery and missile teams. Troop transports could bring reinforcements closer to the front. Escorts would be there to protect the formation and respond if Ukrainian drones appeared. The presence of escorts would suggest that the road was no longer considered fully safe. A normal supply convoy does not need armored protection unless commanders expect trouble. Russia may have understood that the R280 route was exposed, but it still had to use roads like this because the southern front depends on steady movement. That pressure would become stronger after repeated attacks against the Kerch Bridge and the Chonhar crossing. These routes matter because they connect Crimea with Russian-controlled areas and occupied southern Ukraine. When bridges are damaged, watched, or slowed, road corridors through the mainland become more valuable. Russia cannot keep its units supplied if every route toward Crimea becomes uncertain. This is why the convoy would be more than a group of trucks. It would be a moving supply package. It could carry the fuel, shells, troops, and escorts needed to keep Russian operations alive in the south. If it reached Melitopol, the supplies could be moved again toward Zaporizhia, Kherson, Crimea, or other parts of the southern front. Melitopol would matter because it functions as a major logistics point for Russia's southern network. Supplies reaching that area could be sorted, stored, redirected, or pushed closer to the front. A successful delivery would not win the war for Russia, but it could help maintain pressure on Ukrainian positions at the right moment. For the convoy, the mission would depend on speed and order. The vehicles would need to stay together, keep enough distance, and avoid stopping in open areas. As long as the column kept moving, it would still have options. But if the lead vehicles slowed down, or if the middle of the formation was hit, the trucks behind them would have little room to react. That was the danger built into the route. The R280 could help Russia move supplies quickly, but it could also force a convoy onto a predictable road. Fuel trucks, ammunition carriers, troop vehicles, and escorts would all have to follow the same line. Once that line was watched from above, the entire formation would become easier to read. Ukraine would not need to destroy every Russian unit in southern Ukraine to create pressure. It would only need to hit the right convoy at the right time. A group carrying fuel, ammunition, troops, and armored cover would offer exactly that kind of target. As the convoy moved closer to Melitopol, the road that was supposed to protect Russia's supply flow could begin to work against it. The formation would be large, valuable, and difficult to hide. Above the route, Ukrainian reconnaissance UAVs may have been looking for movement, spacing, and the exact order of vehicles. The ambush would have begun before the FPV drones moved toward the convoy, because Ukrainian UAVs may have been watching the road from above. A convoy of that size would not hide easily once it entered an exposed stretch of the R280 route. From the ground, the vehicles may have looked like one organized Russian supply movement heading toward Melitopol. From the sky, the formation could become a pattern. A reconnaissance UAV could see the spacing between trucks, the escort vehicles on the sides, and the heavier vehicles moving inside the column. The first task would not be to attack. It would be to confirm what the convoy was carrying. Ukrainian operators would need to know where the fuel trucks were placed, where the ammunition vehicles were moving, and how the escorts were protecting the formation. A strike against the wrong part of the convoy could still cause damage, but it might not stop the whole mission. The most valuable targets would have to be identified before the FPV drones were sent in. If the convoy was confirmed near the Melitopol direction, the information could be sent back to the Ukrainian unit. That would be the moment when road movement began turning into a planned ambush. The reconnaissance UAV may have kept following the convoy while strike teams prepared FPV drones for launch. The attack would have to happen before the vehicles reached a larger logistics area. If Ukraine prepared FPV drones for the strike, the number would matter because the convoy had several layers of protection. A few drones might damage one or two trucks, but they could also be stopped by gunfire, jamming, or poor approach angles. A larger group would give Ukraine a better chance to hit different parts of the column at nearly the same time. The target list would likely be built around the vehicles that kept the convoy useful. Fuel trucks in the middle could be a priority because a fire there could block the road and slow the vehicles behind them. Ammunition trucks would also be high-value targets because a direct hit could trigger secondary explosions. Escort vehicles on the sides could be marked as well because they could interfere with the attack if they kept firing. This would create a careful order of attack. Some FPV drones could be used to draw Russian attention and force the escorts to react early. Others could approach from lower angles and wait for the moment when the convoy was already adjusting to the first threat. The goal would not simply be to send every drone at once. It would be to make the defense look in too many directions while the most important FPVs moved toward the fuel and ammunition vehicles. The reconnaissance UAV would remain important during this stage. It could give the Ukrainian side a wider view of the road, while FPV operators saw only the camera feed from their own drones. If the convoy changed speed, tightened its spacing, or moved an escort vehicle closer to the fuel trucks, that information could be passed quickly to the strike teams. That would be the real advantage Ukraine was trying to use. The FPV drones would be the weapons, but the reconnaissance UAV would make the convoy readable. It could turn a moving Russian column into a set of targets. By the time the FPV drones moved toward the R280, the ambush would no longer be random. The fuel trucks may have been found. The ammunition vehicles may have been marked. The convoy would still be driving toward Melitopol, but Ukraine would have already chosen where the movement could be broken. Russia's response would begin the moment its anti-drone network detected unusual control signals near the convoy route. If FPV drones were moving toward the R280, Russian electronic warfare teams would likely begin searching for the source of the signal. Their first goal would be to weaken the link between Ukrainian operators and the drones. If the video feed broke, the FPV pilots would lose the target. If the control signal failed, the drones could drift, crash, or miss the convoy completely. At the same time, Russian crews could try to locate the operators themselves. This would be the dangerous part for Ukraine. The strike teams would not only be guiding FPV drones toward the convoy, they would also be creating radio signals that could reveal their positions. Every control pulse could give Russia another clue, and clue could lead to artillery fire. A Russian reconnaissance UAV, possibly an Orlan 10, could be used to scan the area around suspected launch and control points. From above, it could look for signs that exposed a hidden Ukrainian team. A small antenna near a tree line, a heat mark from equipment, a vehicle parked too close to the road, or movement beside a field could become enough to draw attention. If the area was suspected, Russian artillery could begin firing without waiting for perfect confirmation. That would change the battle immediately. Ukraine would be hunting the convoy, but Russia would now be hunting the drone crews. The road would no longer be the only danger zone. The fields, tree lines, and temporary control positions around the route could also become targets. If Russian shells began landing near suspected Ukrainian positions, the crews would have to keep working while the strike was still developing. The FPV drones might already be in the air, so stopping the operation would mean losing the chance to hit the convoy before it reached Melitopol. But staying too long in one position could allow Russian artillery to correct its fire and hit the operators directly. This is why Ukrainian teams may have shifted control between different crews. One team could guide the FPVs during the early approach, then another team could take over if the first position became too dangerous. The handover would have to be fast and clean. A delay of only a few seconds could break the attack rhythm, especially while the drones were flying low and moving toward a defended convoy. Some FPVs might briefly lose stable signal during the transfer. Their camera feeds could shake, freeze, or drop in quality as electronic warfare interfered with the connection. In those moments, the drones would have to hold their direction through waypoint guidance, short bursts of operator input, or momentum-based flight. The operators could not treat the convoy as a clear target on a perfect screen. They would have to fight through noise, pressure, and limited time. Russian artillery would keep trying to force Ukrainian crews to move before the drones reached attack range. That would be the logic behind the counterstrike. Russia would not need to destroy every FPV in the air if it could break the control chain behind them. A drone without guidance would be far less dangerous than a drone still locked onto a fuel truck. But the Ukrainian network might not depend on only one position. Each transfer could keep the strike alive. One control point could be exposed, another could take over, and the FPVs could continue closing the distance. That would make the ambush harder to stop than a single launch from one fixed location. This would be the real fight behind the first explosions. It would not only be drone against convoy, it would be signal against jamming, reconnaissance against concealment, and artillery against moving control teams. As Russian shells searched the ground, the FPV drones could continue pushing toward the road. The convoy might still have armored escorts, electronic warfare around it, but Ukraine would have kept the attack alive long enough for the next phase to begin. If the FPV drones reached the final approach, they would enter from several directions, forcing the Russian escorts to defend more space than they could. One group could come in low near the edge of the road, using the tree line and ground clutter to reduce the time Russia had to react. These drones would not fly high in a clean line. They would stay close to the terrain, where dust, branches, and the shape of the road could make them harder to track through a gun sight. Another group might move toward the rear of the convoy. This would matter because the Russian escorts could not focus only on the front. If the rear vehicles were threatened, drivers and gunners would have to look backward while the rest of the column kept moving forward. That could split attention across the formation, and even a short delay could create confusion. A third group could approach from a harder angle, using the bright sky or low cloud cover to make visual detection more difficult. From inside an armored vehicle, the crew would not have the same wide view as the reconnaissance UAV above. They would have to watch through optics, hatches, and narrow firing angles while the convoy was still moving. If the threat became clear, Russian escorts would likely begin firing. BTR-type vehicles and other protected platforms could turn their weapons toward the incoming drones. Machine guns and automatic cannons would sweep across the low sky, trying to catch the FPVs before they reached the fuel trucks and ammunition carriers. Some of the drones could be hit. One might break apart before reaching the road. Another could lose control after passing through gunfire or electronic interference. A third might drop too low while trying to avoid fire and crash near the shoulder. But these losses would not necessarily stop the attack, because the strike would be built around the idea that not every FPV would survive. The real problem for the Russian escorts would be timing. A gunner could track one drone. He might even destroy two if they came from the same direction. But if several FPVs appeared from different angles, the defense would have to choose. Every second spent turning toward one drone would give another drone more space to close the distance. The convoy itself would also make the defense harder. Escort vehicles would have to avoid firing into their own trucks, and the road would limit how freely they could reposition. If one armored vehicle moved too far from the formation, it could leave a gap. If it stayed too close, its firing angle would become narrow. That would give FPV operators small openings to exploit. By this stage, the drones could be close enough for their camera feeds to show individual vehicles. The fuel trucks in the middle of the convoy might become clearer. The ammunition carriers behind them could still be moving, but their options would be shrinking. The escorts might keep firing, yet the attack would no longer be coming from one clean direction. This would be the pressure Ukraine wanted to create. The FPVs would not need to defeat every escort vehicle first. They would only need to overload the protection around the convoy long enough for the most important drones to reach their assigned targets. By this point, the Russian column might still be moving, but its defense could become less organized. Gunners would be reacting to threats from the side, rear, and low approach paths. Drivers would have to keep formation while watching for explosions ahead. The convoy might not have collapsed yet, but the space around it would be closing fast. The next seconds would decide the strike. If the escort stopped the remaining FPVs, the convoy could still push toward Melitopol. But if even a small number reached the fuel trucks, the entire road movement could turn into a burning traffic jam. If the first successful FPV strikes hit the fuel trucks in the middle of the Russian convoy, the road would begin to change within seconds. The fuel vehicles would be among the most dangerous targets because they would not need a large explosion to cause major disruption. Once a tanker was hit, fire could spread fast across the vehicle and spill onto the road. Thick smoke would rise over the convoy, and the drivers behind it could suddenly lose a clear view of the route ahead. The lead vehicles might still be moving, but the center of the formation would now be burning. That would create one of the worst problems for a road convoy. The front part could continue forward, the rear part could slow down, and the trucks in the middle would have almost no space to escape. A column that had been moving as one group could begin to separate into confused sections. Russian escorts would likely try to keep firing, but the smoke would make their job harder. A gunner who could see an incoming FPV a moment earlier would now have to look through dust, fire, and blocked angles. Some vehicles might turn their weapons toward the side of the road. Others could stay near the burning tankers, trying to protect the remaining trucks. The defense would still be active, but it would no longer be clean. That could be the moment when the next FPVs shifted toward ammunition vehicles and escort platforms. The drones would not need to hit every truck. They would go after the vehicles that could make the collapse worse. An ammunition carrier struck in the cargo area could set off a secondary blast. A damaged escort could lose its ability to cover the rest of the convoy. A truck stopped in the wrong place could block several vehicles behind it. If one ammunition vehicle erupted after the initial hit, the first blast could be followed by stronger explosions as the cargo inside began to detonate. Flames would push outward, fragments could scatter across the road, and nearby drivers would have to choose between stopping, reversing, or leaving the highway. None of those choices would be safe. More vehicles might try to move around the burning section. Some could turn toward the shoulder. Others might cut into softer ground near the road. But heavy trucks and armored vehicles do not handle panic well when they are forced off a prepared surface. A few could become stuck in loose soil, roadside ditches, or uneven ground while trying to avoid the flames. The convoy would become a broken line of separate vehicles, and each group would face its own crisis. Some would be trapped behind the burning fuel trucks. Some could be cut off near the ammunition blasts. Others might try to pull away without knowing whether more FPV drones were still in the air. Above the scene, Ukrainian reconnaissance UAVs may have continued watching. Their role would change after the first strikes. They would be checking which vehicles were destroyed, which were burning, which had been abandoned, and which ones still tried to move. The biggest loss for Russia would not only be the number of vehicles hit, it would be the loss of movement. Fuel could not be delivered on schedule. Ammunition could not move forward as planned. Troop carriers could not continue in a clear formation. The road itself would become part of the damage because fire, wrecks, and scattered vehicles could block the mission. This would be the logic of Ukraine's attack on the R280 route. Destroying a convoy would be important, but breaking its timing could be just as damaging. The question would then become simple. Could this be one of the most effective ways for Ukraine to slow Russia in the south? The R280 ambush scenario would show one of the most dangerous changes in the Ukraine war. A convoy would no longer have to reach the front line. If FPV drones were used against a moving supply mission, the strike would expose a serious weakness in one of Russia's key southern logistics routes. Ukrainian UAVs may have found the convoy, FPV drones may have attacked it, and the strike could turn a transport column into a broken line of burning vehicles. The deeper message would be clear. Roads, trucks, fuel tanks, ammunition carriers, and logistics hubs are now becoming targets as important as trenches. Russia can still send more forces toward the south, but the real question is whether those forces can arrive on time, with enough supplies, and without being broken apart before they reach the next hub. If Ukraine keeps turning nearby routes toward Crimea into drone hunting zones, Moscow may have to spread out its convoys, use smaller roads, add more escorts, and pull more air defense away from other missions. The future is still open. What do you think? Is Ukraine only slowing Russia down, or is it starting to break the supply system behind the southern front? If you found this analysis useful, like, share, and subscribe to Military Force for more clear updates on weapons, battles, and the geopolitical shocks shaping today's war.